Welcome to the Three Times podcast. Today's guest is the drummer Francesca Knowles. Fran plays with accordionist Amy Thatcher in a duo that was recently included in the highly selective roster of Northern Line musicians supported by Jazz North. The novel blend of jazz and folk, and of drums and accordion, plus the virtuoso musicianship evident on their first album, Emergency of a Female Kind, has received glowing reviews. The duo is now recording new tracks to be released later this year. Fran is also the drummer in Grace Petrie's band and has played with many eminent musicians from the Northeast, including Beccy Owen, Ceitidh Mac, Ruth Lyons and Jodie Nicholson, and she can be found teaching drums both privately and at Hexham's Core Music. The tracks in this episode come from Emergency of a Female Kind. They are Power to the Loser, Start Giving a F*** and Save This Woman. You can find more information about the Amy Thatcher and Francesca Knowles duo at www.atfk.co.uk.
We gather all our truth in pieces, find a place to bear our strength, set it into motion, freeing, believing there's room to try our best, within the limits of our boundaries and within the rules of the game. And when you notice you go unnoticed, well come on, we're broken too. I won't play this senseless game. Give the power to the loser, the chooser, the shaker, the fake. Give a reason for the bright.
Francesca Knowles, thank you for talking to the podcast. Can I ask you to summarise what you do, please?
Hello, I am a musician. I'm a freelance, self-employed musician, so I have, guess what you'd call a portfolio career. So I do a mix of teaching and education things and gigs, live gigs and recording and various creative projects.
And how did you get to be where you are today?
I think just building up over time, being based in the Northeast I'm from the Northeast, but I sort of came back here after studying music and I went to do a master's in Sheffield, and then I came back in 2014, and since then I've kind of done a lot of different teaching things. That's linked me up with various other teaching things, and likewise gigs, working with bands, and then that's put me onto other bands, working with other artists, and it's just become a big patchwork of loads of different things basically.
And as I understand it, that's the way that the musician makes a living these days, by having lots of things that they can do and turn to in times of need.
I think it definitely helps, yeah. I feel very grateful to be able to do something like teaching, say like when gigs are quiet, as they sometimes are, you might have a few months where there's not much on in terms of live music, but then you've always got another thing that's happening in between, and then it can be the other way around, so in summer lessons tend to stop for a bit, but then festivals start, so constantly shifting between the two things.
My extensive research on the internet tells me that you started off playing the piano. What was it made you switch to drums?
I think at the time I didn't really think of it as a switch, but more just I want to do that as well. But then for a long time actually it did become a switch, because I think basically I'd learned piano, sort of classical piano, from when I was very young, from when I was about 7, and enjoyed it to an extent, but it was very much a discipline, largely playing music that I wasn't listening to that much and things like that. And then when we had this, my brother had got a second-hand drum kit at home and I wanted to have a go, and then sort of that age, I guess, where you just want to do whatever your big brother does. And then some kids at school were starting a band and they asked if I knew a drummer, and I said, yeah, I'm one.
So just So it's a bit like picking up the bass. It was the way to get into the band.
Yeah, I thought that sounds like fun, and I like that kind of music. So I was already listening to a lot of rock music by then, and I started just teaching myself a few grooves and things like that at home, and then realised, oh, this is a way I could start playing music with my friends. I could play songs that I actually listen to, and it's really fun. It doesn't feel bound to strict rules, or it's kind of a real, I guess, an important factor of my identity at that age as well, is what music you listen to and sorts of people you want to hang out with. And I was going to a lot of gigs as a teenager, so I got more and more into that, and always just thinking, yeah, I want to be doing that.
It is a slightly unusual step, isn't it? Because when I was at school, much the same thing happened to me. I picked up a guitar in common with most of my friends. I mean, we had a drummer, but most of us either wanted to be the singer or the guitarist. I mean, there were very, very few who wanted, who aspired to be a drummer.
Yeah, it's true. I suppose I was quite happy with the idea of sort of sitting at the back, just being part of it. I like to be surrounded by people, and I wasn't interested in being a solo performer, really. Just wasn't something I was looking at specifically, whereas I did want to be part of a group, part of a band doing something, and I liked the kind of team effort of that. Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting because I've now gone back to playing piano a lot as well, but it's in a different context now, and it's in this band context, and I think that for me has made it a lot more fun again. For a long time I just learned solo piano pieces. There was never any mention of working with anyone else as a piano player, except maybe accompanying a choir, which is still quite a lonely experience, I think, a lot of the time for people. And I just thought, yeah, that's not really the connection I'm hoping to make through music.
Yeah.
So and now, I sit at the piano at home and on my own and have a really great time improvising and trying out things and writing music. And it's become a great tool for that, but ultimately, performing live and stuff, I want to do it with other people.
Now, people make rude jokes about drummers, don't they?
They do.
Well, other band members, I should say. But in fact, the drummer is the member of the band that holds it all together, aren't they? As well as driving the song, they kind of hold everything together with the bass. So do you think that was something that maybe subconsciously appealed at the time?
Yeah, maybe. I think definitely that sort of ability to be holding something together without being the main focus of it, and maybe to be making people dance or move or all of that without them necessarily looking solely at you. Yeah, there's something intriguing about that for me. But I think also I was really lucky in terms of when I was at Queen Elizabeth High School in Hexham, and the drum teacher there at the time that I started there was a guy called Jeff Hutchinson, who is a sort of renowned drum teacher in the North East. And actually, when I came back to Newcastle and started working with lots of other musicians and drummers, he was the guy everyone talked about still. I think he's taught at the university, at Newcastle University as well, on a music degree. And in our school, he sent a weirdly high number of people to Berklee College of Music and stuff like that. So we were just really well placed to, with one of the best drum teachers you could imagine really having at that time. And then he actually left a year or two into the time that I was there, but there was another teacher called Jason who I got on with really well, and it was always just this fun thing to do drum lessons. It wasn't like, have you done your practice this week? And funnily enough, it turns out having someone not say that makes you want to practice more. No, Jeff is very eminent in the North East. I had not heard of him before, but I checked him out, and he actually taught John Hurst, who is, our listeners may know, is the guy who organises the Hexham bandstand sessions and is a very, very good drummer. Fantastic, yeah.
And also Will Hammond from Newcastle. Yes, he really was a very... is he still with us? Or
He's still around.
He's still around.
I think he's doing a little bit less teaching than he used to.
Yeah.
But he's still... I think drummers are still contacting him all the time and trying to get advice.
A man to look up to, certainly.
Yeah.
Did you have any role models at this time?
It's interesting to think about that now, I suppose, because I didn't really think of it in those terms very much at that point. I had bands that were my absolute favourites, and probably I just thought, I want to play in a band like that, and maybe that counts as kind of role models. But looking back from the perspective now, for example, that I didn't know a single woman who played the drums, not at all. And it's not that there weren't, but they just weren't really covered very much. I used to buy drum magazines and music magazines, and I loved them. But there was always a sense of like, it wasn't really entirely for me. I just don't think I really noticed that at the time. And now I kind of look back and think, I wonder what I was finding in that that still made me want to do it so much anyway. I'm not entirely sure, but I guess it was just loving the music a lot. There's things like I listened to Nirvana very obsessively from when I was about 10 or 11. I got into that, and then that sort of followed on into Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age and Pixies and all that sort of grunge and post-grunge rock music. Yeah. And so Dave Grohl was a big figure, and there were a lot of drummers, but actually a lot of the time I wasn't primarily focused on only drummers. I really liked songwriters, and I liked just bands overall, and I wasn't always thinking I want to learn the exact technique that they're playing. I think I just was really interested in the songs and listening and picking up all the different parts. So a lot of how I play now, I think, is more like a response to the other instruments, more than, say, trying to redo or sort of regurgitate techniques that I learned from specific drummers.
You do play in a range of genres, don't you? So do you think that's what led you to do that?
Yeah, I had a pretty broad listening, catalogue, I guess, of music. But I mean, I think as a teenager it was all primarily rock music, but then sort of folk came into that quite a bit, some jazz stuff, some electronic music later came in as well. And I'd never disliked classical music. There's still always been an element of that as well, and a lot of contemporary classical music I still listen to quite a bit as well. So yeah, it was a broad range, so I've probably taken just little bits without even necessarily realising.
Yeah. There's a very good video of Queens of the Stone Age playing No One Knows with Dave Grohl on drums. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? The power that he hits those drums with, it's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I used to go for that kind of power, and I've softened quite a lot.
Well, I've just been to see the new Led Zeppelin film. Have you seen it yet?
I haven't yet. No.
Being Led Zeppelin is about their time up to the end of the second album. So I'm sorry.
Oh, great.
And of course, there's a small bit in there on John Bonham, and I'd forgotten what John Bonham was like as well.
Incredible.
He is incredible, not just for the power of his drums, but for the number of rhythms that whatever else you call it, that he manages to cram into a song. But you don't actually notice it there until you look, or rather listen, with some attention, because it kind of all fits into the Led Zeppelin noise, doesn't it? But actually, if you took it away, it wouldn't be anything like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I still teach some of his techniques and some of his little grooves and things to students now, because he is, very iconic. And I think every interview I've ever read with Dave Grohl, he'll say everything he does is just a poor copy of John Bonham, essentially. But John Bonham also had a kind of jazz education as well. He was brilliant. Don't know how else to put it.
So what's your view of another icon of mine? Not that I've got many drumming icons, but Keith Moon, who has been criticised for lacking rhythm. I've read that Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey used to turn around and wonder what he was playing. And if it hadn't been for John Entwistle playing the bass, they wouldn't have known which song they were in. But when you watch him, he's a spectacular drummer, isn't he?
Yeah, I think what he did was really interesting, and it's fun. He's fun to watch, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's using a lot of techniques that aren't the typical thing you might be taught, but in that sense it's original and it's interesting, and I think that's probably a good thing. I don't think there's anything worth criticising about.
And does anybody come in and say, teach me any Keith Moon techniques?
No, luckily not, because I think that'd be quite hard to do.
So you went to university and you did music, and then you did a master's in ethnomusicography. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yeah, ethnomusicology. It was. It's basically, the kind of anthropology of music, but ultimately it's not a subject, but more an approach to thinking about music and to studying music in general. So it sounds so specific as a word, but it's actually an incredibly broad term. If you're looking at something in an ethnomusicological sense, then you're thinking about what the people who made a particular kind of music or are making that music, how they do that, why they do that, all the different teaching and learning methods they might have, how the tradition might have formed. So there's an element of musicology in there as well. But ultimately, yeah, it's about people and societies and cultures and how music is tied in with all of that.
Yeah. So perhaps understanding what the roots of music are in a particular society.
Yeah, exactly. And it might be something, so my master's thesis looked at the sort of teaching and learning of Balinese gamelan in the UK. So I'd done a little bit of gamelan over in Bali. When I came back to the UK, I was really interested in how many gamelan groups there are actually over here in a place that is so far from the culture of Bali or any part of Indonesia that you think, well, how's that happened? That's quite unusual, that there aren't the same reasons that people would do that. But I visited all these community groups in London and Aberdeen and sort of all over the country, and people love it. And it turned out, a bit like samba drumming. There's a lot of that here, and it doesn't just have to happen in Brazil. It's still relevant to people in other contexts as well. And people who didn't otherwise play any music had found it was something that really occupied their days that in a way they'd never expected. So.
Yeah. And do you think these different types of music have remained in their niche, or do you think that they sort of spread out and more broadly influenced popular music?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the latter. And I find it fascinating looking at all the different sort of diasporas, for instance. So, cultural groups that have moved to different areas of the world, and then, of course, they bring with them different musics, and then that mixes with something else from the new place they're in. And yeah, it's really fascinating how it happens. And it kind of comes back to, each individual musician is like this, in that they are just, how they play music is a result of all the different musics they've experienced throughout their musical lives, So I don't play like the next drummer because we haven't had the same life, we haven't had the same experience of music. And I think that's quite exciting. It makes for more interesting music overall.
Yeah. And do you think that this informs the drumming that you're able to perform in your duo and in the other bands that you play in? Do you bring these roots in?
Yeah, a little bit sometimes. There's definitely sometimes, maybe subconsciously, and then sometimes consciously, there might be a certain rhythm I've heard somewhere or an idea I've seen, and I think, I really want to put that in. But I still have to make it relevant to the rest of the music as well, so it'll be influenced by that mostly, and then you might be able to bring that in.
Well, talking about the kind of music that you make, I first came across you when you were playing with Beccy Owen, and I've since seen you playing with Ceitidh Mac from Newcastle, with Ruth Lyons, also in Newcastle. These are Newcastle greats, I have to say. North East greats. And with Grace Petrie, you did a support term with your duo with Amy Thatcher, the accordionist, on that tour as well. Yeah. That's a diverse range of music in there. Ceitidh Mac is a little bit jazzy, folky, ambient-y. Ruth Lyons is kind of more straightforward song, I think. Beccy Owen is a bit, she's song but kind of free-formy, jazzy, inflected stuff. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that'd be fair.
And Grace Petrie is a political folk singer and comedian these days.
yeah, she does.
And I recommend everybody to go and see Grace Petrie if they can. Yeah. And also Jodie Nicholson, I got written down here, who I wasn't aware that you'd played with before. Yeah. And I've listened to your music with Amy Thatcher and again with Beccy Owen, and it seems to me that not consistently, but in some of the songs, you are not performing the role of a conventional drummer by keeping the beat and driving the rhythm. It's almost as though the other musicians are keeping to the rhythm, especially when you're playing with Amy Thatcher with her accordion. And you're kind of, I'm going to use a technical term here, skipping around in the background with some very diverse rhythms.
Yeah.
Is that a fair description of what you play?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say especially with Amy, she plays in such a rhythmic way, and what I first noticed when I heard her play was the things she would compose for accordion, solo accordion. They'd have all sorts of polyrhythms and interesting stuff for me to kind of take elements of that and think, ooh, I could highlight that, or I could do that. And so I was actually doing some recording with her yesterday, and there was a particular piece we were recording, and I said at the end, we were sort of looking at, we weren't recording to a click, so we were saying, has that stuck to the same tempo when we listen back? Just checking it was about right. And And I said, well, I'm using you as my metronome, actually, because it was just a wilder bit of a track. So a moment where there's lots of drum fills and lots of different things happening in the drum part. And actually, Amy was the one playing the consistent thing that's the same in each bar for that moment. But then there are other moments where we swap over and she'll do the really complicated tune and I have to dial it back and do something that just holds that, and stays behind it. So, yeah, the role is like constantly fluctuating, especially in that project. And I think that's one thing I find really fun about it.
So let's talk a bit more about your duo with Amy.
So the first album's Emergency of the Female Kind.
That's right, yeah. And that's an album of contrast, isn't it? There's a lot in Amy's music that you instantly recognise as drawn from folk.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously playing the accordion kind of points you in that direction anyway. But then there's also quite a bit of jazz and, as you say, variation in rhythm. And that's reflected in the album's tracks. There are songs on there which are poignant ballads. Mm-hmm. Did I write down the title? Save This Woman was the one I was listening to. That is intimate, I thought. That's the word I've written down here, intimate. Mm-hmm. And it's just you and an electric piano, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a track on there called Start Giving a F Word, and I can't say that because I don't want Apple to put a warning on this podcast, but starting something beginning with an F that sounds, I thought, quite Led Zeppelin-ish.
Cool.
I thought this is kind of a heavy accordion riff. And then is it the title track, or is it the first track, that is a relatively straightforward rhythm, and not particularly complicated, but it does the kind of stop-start bit where you're not expecting it. There's some folk songs do.
Yes.
When you're dancing around and suddenly stop, and then you've got to turn around and go the other way. So it's quite a complicated musical palette you've got there with Amy, isn't it? Yeah,
and I think it's interesting listening to, obviously we've written a fair bit of material since then, and we're just recording that at the moment and due to release it later this year. But finding a clear direction has been quite hard because we have so many things we want to say, so many things we want to put in there. But then the fun thing of it is, maybe we can have all this contrast so long as there is some element that says this is still us. And it's okay to have lots of influences. It's okay to show that you can go to the extreme depths of what your instrument can do at either end of a spectrum and bring that all together, essentially. But so we have a couple of songs on there that are very sort of, like you say, intimate, personal, low-key in terms of the number of instruments or the volume, the sort of sound. And then others that are just completely mad. And I think, it's a lot of thought of, what can I do with this one? What do I want to bring to this one? Mm-hmm. What mood is this for? And why not?
Yeah. It seems to me that the possibilities are wide open because you must be the only accordion drum duo in the country, or is there another?
That we know of at the moment. We do actually. There is another fantastic accordion player who plays in a trio with a drummer and a guitar player called Heather Ferrier, who's in Newcastle as well. Somehow, even though there are similar elements, they're in completely different directions, and then she does something that is still contemporary in a lot of ways, but also maybe a little bit more traditional than ours as well.
I think it is the fact that there are only two instruments in your duo, which is not a surprise, is it? But I mean, there is a third one. There's keys occasionally, isn't it?
Yes.
And I've seen Amy playing her left hand on the accordion and her right hand on the keys as well. So I mean, you could say there are three. But the space that provides is what gives your music its scope, isn't it? Because you've both got a lot of room to move around with just the two of you there.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be something like, okay, we're both able to play lots of different things and do what we want, but we're also limited in a way to how much can we do live. And that can be quite useful sometimes because, okay, this is going to be keys and voice because I've only got so many hands, and that's what works for this anyway, you know. And then this is going to be all drum kit. This is going to have a section where it goes to the keys as long as I can get back to the kit somehow. We've got a Roland SPD drum pad as well, which I have as part of my kit setup, and that can trigger some different sounds, and that's been really fun to play around with because that's actually something that you find more and more. Almost every contemporary drummer is using one of those now in a live setup, so yeah, that's been fun to play with.
Can that also trigger like a loop, so you'd be playing to a loop?
Yeah, so if we had a part that we really want to be in that live sound and it's on the record but we just can't physically do it, then I can trigger it at some point in the track.
And you mentioned a moment ago about playing to a click. Is that something that you would do primarily for recording purposes, or is it something that you think is musically important too?
Yeah, primarily recording, but there have been lots of live environments where I'm doing that as well, especially as the drummer. Drummers, when they're practicing, will always practice with a click. It's a really good way to practice because it just really gets you to work on your timing. There are lots of different ways you can work with a click in your practice, but essentially if you want a really tight live show that has, say, samples that you're using on a drum pad, and say there's a backing track or something like that, sometimes that's the case, then you're going to have in-ears with a click in there as well, and everything has to happen at the perfect time.
That must take a bit of practice.
It does a little bit, yeah, but it's
because I mean, it seems to me that your music is a bit freeform. That's the way it sounds. So if you've got a click, but you're trying to get that kind of feel, that's the tricky bit, isn't it? Yeah,
it totally depends what. So there's certain acts I play in where the click is on almost every track. With Amy, we do have a lot of that as well, so very clear sections and stuff. But yeah, the idea live is to, even if you are using a click, is to give a sort of naturalistic impression that, no, this is just, the music is working, you know. Yeah. Obviously, you don't want the audience to hear the click, because that would really take away the magic.
It would take away the magic. Now, you deserve some congratulations, because you have just been awarded, I haven't written it down, but
Northern Line.
Northern Line, that's right.
Yeah, so Amy and I, as a duo, we're on this year's roster for something called Northern Line.
And what does that mean?
It's basically an initiative set up by Jazz North, who are an organisation in the North, with Manchester Jazz Festival, where you basically get some funding towards live touring, and they help you plan a tour or plan a series of gigs. And basically get your name out there to certain promoters, mostly across the north, but it might also be the gigs take place sort of across the UK, a bit further afield as well. And we get a slot on a main stage slot at Manchester Jazz Festival. So that'll be in May, and then later this year, I think it's after September, we'll have a series of gigs that will be sort of partially funded by Northern Line. So there's a whole roster of artists on there, and each year
there's not that many. I mean, you have done very well to be on that roster. There's not that many.
I think there's 6.
Yes, exactly so.
So yeah, that's been really great, and their support is brilliant, especially because we have such a clear idea now of what we want to do live, and it's sometimes, you know, the touring industry at the minute is very, very low on funding and very difficult to do if you don't have a way of funding it. Very hard to make money on ticket sales and for everyone to be paid fairly and things like that. So it's really exciting to get something like that, because it means we can make our ideas for how we do it live, we can make that a reality.
And the genre that you're working in is not the most popular. I mean, it's not as if it's indie or one of the other ones that don't come to mind at the moment that lots of people
not an
enjoy.
obvious hit maker.
I wouldn't call it niche, but because you're kind of, I would say that your music is jazz, but it's got a lot of jazz in it, hasn't it? But also got a lot of folk in it. And so somebody coming to your music uninformed would be surprised, pleasantly, one would hope, but they would be surprised by what they heard, wouldn't they? Yeah,
I think so. I think a lot of people, and we've even had people in crowds say, like, oh, I saw the accordion come out and I didn't know what was going to happen, and then I didn't know it would be that. You know? They have an idea of maybe like a more old-fashioned idea of what folk music is, or thinking of it as, well, you're going to do something traditional, and obviously, as you've heard, it's pretty far from traditional, really, with just maybe a few of the original ideas kind of come from a folk traditional. Yeah,
but that's not to say that it's inaccessible at all. I don't think it is. No, I think it's very easily approachable. I mean, if you wanted to persuade somebody to listen to jazz and you wanted an entry point, or equally for folk and you wanted an entry point, you would say, well, how about listening to Amy Thatcher and Fran Knowles, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, well, I like that. That sounds good to me.
So touring is difficult. I mean, I think everybody that I've spoken to in the music world is saying the same thing. There's hardly any money about. What's the experience like of touring with an established band like Grace Petrie's?
It's great. You know, still can be hard, a struggle for everyone involved in financial terms sometimes, but for me, coming in as a musician, a much more simple thing. I'm not having to plan anything. I just get told what the plan is, and then I have to get myself there, you know. And with someone like Grace, who's such a brilliant performer, and she's practiced her craft for years and years, so it's one of those where you feel very safe on the stage. You know that it's all going to be fine no matter what happens, you know. Yeah. And they're just a really, really fun band to tour with, so yeah, that's been a really nice experience.
There were two important reports out, 2023, I think in 2023, about sexism and misogyny in music. Has this been a challenge to you?
I'd say generally in that band, for example, I think we've generally, you know, safety in numbers maybe.
Because it's an all-women band.
It's pretty much. There's one...
Ben.
One guy, Ben, yeah. And I think maybe there's a certain, I don't know, the venues we play know what they've booked, and so and the crowds generally know what they're coming to see, so that's a pretty nice, safe environment to be in. But certainly as a female drummer, I mean, I've had plenty of, nothing ever that made me feel unsafe or anything, but definitely a thing of just feeling like there's someone in the room who thinks I don't deserve to be there, or is going to try and explain my own instrument to me, or things like that. Yeah. There's plenty of that still happens, unfortunately.
I think sadly mansplaining is still a fact of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Grace Petrie's band is all female. Beccy Owen's band was all female.
Yeah.
What is it about performing? Sorry, I forgot Ben again, didn't I? Grace Petrie.
Yeah,
sorry, Ben, I don't mean to do that.
I don't know if you've been sorry.
Grace Petrie's band is mostly female. Beccy Owen's band was all female.
Yeah.
What is it about performing with other women exclusively? Do you think that brings something special to the music?
I think there's definitely... Well, actually, Beccy Owen's band was the first time I'd worked with all women in a music environment, and there was just a real sort of generosity and a lot of space to explore music in a way that felt very low pressure, and yet the standard was very high. So it was nice to work in that sort of environment with no sense of competition between people, or kind of everyone was very open with talking about things, and So that was lovely, and that was very new to me, because I'd always, not that I'd had too many negative experiences really, but just quite different experiences where I'd usually been the only woman in a band up to that point. Yeah, it was like, oh, there are different ways we can do this. It doesn't have to be led in this way. It doesn't have to be ego-based, all that sort of thing. And we can be very open with each other. And yeah. So I think I've really enjoyed that more and more. And I think a lot of the people who've reached out to me to work with me, it's not just about the fact of playing an instrument. It's also that maybe there's a sense that we can get on together, and that's just as important as anything else. And maybe if they know I already work in those kinds of environments, then I'll be, a decent person to work with. I hope that's what they think,
Yeah.
So yeah, it has made a difference. I think hopefully it's getting to a point now where it's less crucial to have those spaces, because it's becoming more of a learned, open thing. But yeah.
I think there's been a big increase in the number of women performing in the Northeast, hasn't there? There was a positive initiative from the Sage, wasn't there, to promote young women in music, and I think that's been effective, because there are a number of very talented women on the scene now, aren't there?
Yeah, huge number. And it makes you realise, I think, sometimes maybe if the odds are a bit stacked against you in industry terms, then your drive is even stronger. And the level of organisation, the level of skill, and there's so many women who are just doing such great things in the Northeast. So that's been really nice to see, because that just really didn't have a platform when I was a teenager.
Can we talk a bit about your drum teaching? We're here at Core Music, where you teach drums. What kind of students do you have?
It's a real mix of students I have. So over the years, I've taught people of all ages, from 6 to about 76, and all different levels. So, I think these days I have pretty much everyone I teach is under 18. But yeah, I've got some total beginners who've never tried it before, and then some people who are sort of working on some of the higher grades. And I've also worked with some adults who just wanted to come to it as, I've got to this age, I've never tried this thing, and I've always wanted to, so let's give it a go. And it might just be that we play songs that they really like, or it might be there are more technical challenges than that. But yeah, it's very mixed, so I enjoy that.
So I infer from that there's a lot of interest in learning the drums. It's not like it's an instrument that's going out of fashion these days.
Yeah, more and more actually. I think it must have gone up a crazy amount in recent years, because I know that I teach here and I teach in schools and do some private lessons as well, and I'd say I also do some piano lessons in schools, and piano is still generally for young kids the most popular one. Whether that's the kids or their parents, I don't know.
I imagine there's quite a few parents who don't want their children to learn drums, isn't there?
Yeah, but I'd say that drums is probably the second most popular.
Oh, right.
And I think that's generally the kids are saying, that's the one I want to do. And if their parents want them to get into music, then if that's the only thing they're showing interest in, then well, let's go for it. And I think that's great. I mean, getting a good sense of rhythm, a good understanding of that from an early age is really helpful, because that doesn't just help with drumming, that helps with everything.
So if somebody's thinking about learning more about drums, they should get in touch with Core Music in Hexham.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some great drum teachers here as well. We've got George Hutton, we've got Dan Ward and Sean. There's a whole number of, and for all instruments here, but there's a good drum contingent.
Yeah.
So.
What advice would you have for an aspiring drummer who wants to progress and maybe get into a band and maybe thinking about a career in music? Not necessarily, fully professional, but wants to play in a band. I
think getting along to things like jams can be a really, really good way of getting into just that spontaneous playing, but often with people you don't even know, and so you make those connections. If you practice enough on your own that you're feeling like, a jam is something you could do, then I think that's going to be the most helpful thing. And if anything, practicing on your own is great, but there's no real life application of that until you actually go and do it. So getting to a jam is essentially playing a gig where you don't have to be booked to play a gig. and that is practicing ultimately the thing you really want to do.
And where would somebody find a jam?
That is a very good question. I don't know, I think there might be some jams in Hexham that still go on at the tannery now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know of lots in Newcastle, so places like Prohibition, which is the old jazz cafe on Pink Lane, that has some stuff on. The Globe has quite a bit going on as well. And there's all sorts of different styles of things. You know, if you were a folk percussionist, for instance, you'd get along to sessions in pubs, and they're very open and very informal. There's lots of jazz jams going on at things like the Globe and stuff that great to get involved with. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. And I think just like going to a lot of events in general, going to other people's gigs, to meet like-minded musicians. You know, if there's a particular genre you're interested in learning about, then go and see the people who are already doing it. And then maybe you'll meet some other people who want to do something like that when you're there.
Now, you mentioned a while back that you're recording a new album with Amy Thatcher. What kind of material is in that?
I'd say it's ventured quite far from folk now. I'm not sure. Is the folk still there? Maybe a tiny bit. There's definitely still plenty of accordion in it. But yeah, maybe we've gone slightly more jazzy, slightly more electronic-y. We've been playing with a lot of synthesizers, that's been fun. But there's still, just as much accordion and drums on it as ever, and all the keys stuff. And we're basically just working out how we can, maybe a bit less than last time, but how we can actually put it all together at this point. Because it's still quite varied.
So what are the mechanics of putting the album out, do you think? You don't have a recording contract?
No, so it's on our own terms, so we're very much hoping to do it. Well, we will do it this year. Basically, it's about setting yourselves up with a timeline, because all the promotion stuff can be really important. So yeah, we're unsure at the moment whether it's going to be a full album or an EP this time. We might also do a couple of EPs instead, sort of over a longer period. But at the moment, it's a case of taking what we've recorded and thinking, okay, how does this fit together in the best way? And then what do we want to put out as a single? How can we promote that? And what's the most useful timing for us in terms of what gigs we can be doing at the same time?
What do you think of the pros and cons of putting out a single track versus an EP versus a full album? Because I've seen comment that for everything you put out, you get one hit. So why put out 12 tracks and get one hit when you can put out 12 separately and get 12 hits? Yeah,
I think it depends how you're looking at what you're making. Are you looking at it as a way just to get that many streams, or are you looking at it as a piece of art that you want to make and you have a specific idea in mind? And if that's just for a single track, then fair enough, why not? And plenty of people do that. But I think for us, we're a bit more, we like to experiment with stuff, so having a longer form thing to do that on is a bit more fun for us personally. We're not expecting to have a big hit single, but it's going to be more a series of tracks that we hope people will really want to listen to. However, saying that, we put out a full album last time, and when you put out a full album, that is a lot of work that goes into that. And if you don't follow that up with a lot of promotion and releasing singles and stuff, as we didn't, then it kind of just, people do hear it, but it doesn't reach as many people as you might hope. And you think, okay, so we want a different strategy this time. So maybe doing something slightly shorter where we could release a few of the tracks individually, but then we've got it all together. But then we still have some more material left over to use on a later release. Then that might be a good idea, because it means we don't have to wait until another 2 years down the line when we have enough material to make a whole other album. But it's a lot of work in all cases, so you've got to work out the most sort of efficient way you can do it, I guess, as well as writing the music you want to write.
Now, you're a great live band, you and Amy, and very accomplished performers. With that in mind, what is the purpose of having recorded music, do you think?
I guess the main thing is to get people to come and see us live. Not that we wouldn't also just appreciate them listening to our music, but yeah, I think for us we know that it's mostly going to be about the live experience. We hope we'll have plenty of listeners just for the recorded stuff too, but I think ultimately you're hoping to create a fan base with that and then bring them to your live live gigs.
Are you contemplating any vinyl copies that you can sell at the gigs and sign and, as a memento?
Would really love to. The problem with vinyl, as much as I love it, and I do collect it as well, but it's just so expensive to make. So you have to know that you're going to be able to sell a certain number of those. I think I hope that this time that might be the case. Now we've put one album out. This is a second release. I hope that enough people might be on board that they would want that, because CDs obviously aren't quite as fashionable anymore, but a lot of people do still buy CDs at gigs too. Yeah. So I've definitely known some people who haven't brought their stuff out on CD, and then they get all these people at the merch table saying, "Where's your CD?"
Yeah.
And didn't know you were still around. Didn't know anyone listened to these. So it's getting it on all the right platforms so that you actually can sort of address people's needs for all the different ways they listen to music.
And you have to think about all this kind of stuff yourself. You don't have people to do it for you, do you?
Yeah, that's the thing. It would be lovely just to have someone to do all that bit, because all the spreadsheets are pretty boring compared to actually doing the music and sorting the artwork and stuff. That's good fun too. Yeah, sometimes the number stuff gets a bit dull, so and time consuming, very time consuming.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Fran. I hope that the album comes out, if it is an album, comes out this year, or the EP comes out, and I'll look forward to that.
Thanks very much.
Have you got a tour that's coming round the northeast?
We have a few local gigs coming up in the next couple of months, and then we'll hopefully have a full tour later in the year, right, which is yet to be planned.
And where can people find out about that?
So you can find out about that on Instagram, Amy and Fran, we're down on there, or on our website, which is atfk.co.uk.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
She's coasting in the cage, broken from the rage. This woman I can save this woman. Head down in the light, back down from the fight. There's freedom in retreat, taking off the beat, 'cause hope's thin right now, hope's thin right now. A bold spin somehow. She's coasting in the cage, broken from the rage. This woman I can save this woman. Time turns the table, a token of your turn. Avoid at your peril, feeling what you learn, 'cause hope's thin right now, hope's thin right now. A bold spin somehow. She's coasting in the cage, broken from the rage. This woman I can save breeze coasting in the cage.
Thanks for listening to the 3 Times podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and tell your friends about it.